Andrew, thanks for talking to me today. I saw you on LinkedIn with your post that was so vulnerable. And I wanted to go behind the scenes and talk about it because um, Stop Asian Hate and the incidents for Asian Americans are not talked about. And it's not talked about very much on LinkedIn, except for if you're in an Asian network. So you, as a lawyer and a professor and a prominent one, like DC lawyer and professor, it's kind of a big deal for you to tell people, hey, this is not happening just to people in Chinatown in New York and San Francisco. This is a big deal. So can you set up the premise of what did you share and kind of go behind the scenes of why you decided that it was important to share?
Yeah, Jolene, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I'm happy to share my own experience. So by way of background, I'm Andrew Ting. I lived in Washington, D.C. since I graduated from law school 18 years ago. I run a legal compliance team of 12 people, and I also teach at George Washington University Law School and Georgetown Business School. I have two children, ages 15 and 12, married to a woman originally who grew up in Taiwan. So on LinkedIn, I had about 5,000 followers. And then I posted about 2 weeks ago about two different incidents that happened to me, my family. The first one happened to me. I was walking in New York Times Square about 8 o'clock in the morning on a weekday, lots of people, rush hour. And then a well-dressed man lunged at me, screaming, "F you, China," like pushed me towards the wall. I was very surprised because it's rush hour, lots of people around, right? And then my impulse was to just get out of the situation, right? So I quickly walked away. He followed me screaming, and I ran into a Paris baguette bakery on West 44th Street on Broadway. And then he left. And then I kind of looked around and I made my way to the train station.
So Andrew,
Mhm.
hold on with that. What were you thinking when now he's following you? What is
Mhm.
your mindset?
Like, what's this guy's problem, right? And then I see all these New Yorkers just hurrying by, not wanting to get involved. They're probably busy, just want to get to work. And
And he's yelling at you at the same time.
oh yeah, he's yelling at me. And there are a lot of crazy people on the streets. Like, I think this one was specifically anti-Asian, but in my weekend there, I saw other homeless people yelling, and maybe the New Yorkers thought, oh, this is just another thing, don't get involved. But
But this guy is not homeless.
no, he was very well dressed. He had like a very nice jacket on and like multiple layers, and he was very well groomed. Like, he had a beard, but it wasn't like the kind of scraggly, unkempt beard that you would think a homeless person had. He was like very well groomed, like
Yeah.
symmetrically shaved and all
Yeah.
this stuff. Definitely did not look like a guy that you would think would have these kinds of behaviors. That's just kind of why I was kind of shocked, right? Lots of people around. I was just trying to go to the train station, and just this random white guy pops out at me. So I kind of shook it off. And then 2 months ago, or a month and a half ago, I take my kid every day to school. We live in downtown DC. And there are two homeless encampments on the way to school, even though we live right downtown and it's a wealthy area. And one person woke up. We were walking by around 6:45 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and then saw us and just started screaming about Chinese people, screaming stuff like in gibberish, like pretend Chinese words, and kept doing so until we were about like 75 feet away, just at the top of their lungs, etc. I think they were just unhappy that they had slept outside, and they saw two people who were on their way to school, well dressed, and just were really angry. And that was their way to equalize the kind of disparity in our social economic status together. And with that, I had turned to my son afterwards, like, "Hey, Ryan," he's 15, "are you okay?" And he looked at me and he said, "Daddy, I'm totally fine." I said, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm used to this kind of thing." And that for me was really sad because while I admire that he's resilient, it's kind of sad that our kids in this generation are just kind of resigned to that. And so I didn't know whether to be sad or proud. So my LinkedIn post was pretty short, and it just had a couple of sentences on the New York Times Square incident. And then the homeless incident and my conversation with my kid, and I didn't know whether to be sad or proud. And I know that I wanted to pair it because in past exchanges with folks, they're like, hey, if you don't feel comfortable in this country, get out, right? Go to wherever you came from. And I don't want to do that. I am American. So the third part of my post said, hey, I'm American. I love this country. Lived here 40 years, almost 40 years. My wife has lived here. She grew up in Taunton, lived here as well. I've lived in Washington, D.C. for almost 20 years, right? And I wanted to explicitly acknowledge that most people in the US are good people. And there are a lot of good opportunities. Like we came here as immigrants. My wife and I both went to Harvard Law School. That's where we met. We work as general counsels for our companies, et cetera. But we still deal with this crowd just because of the way we look at when we're in the street, like, just in major US cities. And then my fourth part of my post, my final part of my post just said, hey, um, I'm really not okay. I'm not like my kid. I'm used to it. But I'm really not okay. And I kind of left on an open-ended question. And see, I'm kind of tearing up a little bit because it's sad. And then I remember I wrote it quickly one morning before I sent my kid to school. It's kind of like, just get it out there. I remember he was at the door. I said, hey, Daddy, we got to leave to school. I said, just a minute. And I posted it off. I took him to school. After an hour, I think there were like 200 likes or 200 reactions, support, et cetera. Within a day, there was like 7,000 or 8,000 reactions. And I was like, okay, this is going to go viral. And the last 2 weeks total, I think it had about 1.8 million views, about 17, 18,000 reactions or so. And then probably over 1,000 comments with dialogue. So a really strong reaction from mostly Americans, a lot Asian Americans, really people all over the world. And I added about 1,900 followers or two. So going from 5,050 or so to almost over 6,900. And a lot of them are people of all races, not just in the US. People who are like, hey, I am so glad you stood up and you talked about this. Because honestly, it's not a great thing. Like my brand is I talk about legal panels that I'm talking at, right? Philosophy issues, that kind of stuff. This is kind of shameful. But people are like, no, we celebrate it. A lot of Asians across the US actually wanted to connect with me, maybe because they saw me as an empathetic person. And people were remarkably warm. Like white people apologized, hey, if you're ever in Seattle or Minneapolis, come to my house. Some people sent me Amazon gift codes to buy books, and they recommended specific books for my kid to read on anti-prejudice. Some people offered me sports tickets, and really just genuinely warm conversations. A couple of real DEI influencers like you and others invited me to podcasts or other conversations for collaboration. So I was just really humbled by the outpouring of support. And sad that it started with a negative, but glad that it, inspired some positive connections. And also a lot of other Asians coming forward to say, hey, I'm crying when I read your post. Several people said that. And now I feel like I can actually speak up too.
Yes, 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 all of that. And I want to ask you a few questions. How often do you post, you're talking about, you post lawyer stuff. How often do you post anti-Asian or Stop Asian hate things online?
Maybe once or twice a year, typically around May, because it's Asian Pacific
So,
American
so like
Heritage
kind of
Month.
like the Asian news reporters, how they're allowed to do one story. So,
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
so why did you think it was important to do this?
It's part of our lived experience, right? Um, and like tomorrow, Wednesday, I'm on a panel on authentic leadership. And I was thinking about authentic leadership, right? And what that means is first being honest with yourself and honest with others. And if something is wrong, you kind of want to make people aware of it. And then the awareness comes, an action plan, right? You gather support and you take action. even if it's a negative thing that doesn't, fit with the image of me as a Harvard educated lawyer and law professor, right? But hey, it's just life. It happens to anybody. And I think people who know me as Professor Ting, they're like, God, that happens to you. It can happen to anyone. And I think is an empowering message for a lot of the Asians Americans who reached out to me too. I also think that it crossed racial boundaries too, because I did not name the races of the people who kind of threatened me, and I left it somewhat open-ended. Just like anybody can relate to a dad and his son, right? Just talking about how you just get used to crap. So in that way, I try to hit more universal human conditions and also defuse like, hey, get out of your country, you don't belong, to say, no, I love America. And sometimes that tug of ambivalence makes the emotional connection a lot stronger because it's all true.
Yes. So as an Asian American who does identify as Asian, Japanese, Chinese, and Swedish, I saw your posts and I have actually on jolenejang.com, I have timeline of attacks. And there were so many attacks that it wasn't loading. So I put them by monthly or monthly. And so I'm reading your posts and you weren't physically harmed.
No.
And then you were yelled at by a homeless person, right? And so all the things that I report on, they're deaths, right? They're stabbings and they're deaths. And
Yep.
what's so interesting about this as I try and figure out how to share with non-Asians what's happening and how to build some empathy, not totally delved into that yet, learning from you, is that you were able to, like you said, use the parent father piece. And this was not, it wasn't so bad that people could hear it, right? So people respond to a slap, but not to a murder. If it's murder of an Asian, like they don't want to see it. They don't want to hear about the stabbing. I don't want to see it. I see much yucky stuff already. But I think that this idea, the concept of a lunge and potentially danger, and he's a professional, he's a white collar guy. It's like, oh, and I think that you struck a balance of like, it's not too bad, like in comparison.
It can happen to you, right?
Yeah.
And like in Times Square, one of the most iconic places. Well, I would say though that I did a follow-on post just talking about the community reaction. And I was very honest. It says, look, what happened to me is just verbal abuse compared to like the Buffalo supermarket shooting, which happened the weekend after. That's much horrible, or the war in Ukraine. I have friends in Ukraine. And I remember one of the relatives of the victims in the Buffalo supermarket shooting also posted on LinkedIn, obviously much more horrible. And that also went viral with like 40,000 or so reactions that I saw. And it should go much more viral because death is far worse than like the verbal abuse that I experienced. Um, but I said, look, all I can do is talk to my own personal experience, right? And I remember I have friends in the media, and they say if it bleeds, it leads. But I think we get so desensitized to just statistics, right? Like 1 million COVID deaths in the last week or two. We passed that milestone. 1 million's a lot. Like my Aunt Shirley was one of them before vaccines were widely available. And and somehow life goes on, right? And so maybe it's something about how I write or how I left it open-ended. I'm not sure, but I'm happy to collaborate with you to try to make sure this message gets out.
Yeah, I think my one of my many challenges is that
Mm,
people do not, they can hear a yelling, but they do not want to hear stabbing, rape, or all the Asians, daily. Because I post, the Bangladeshi that was a couple weeks ago was pushed in the subway and died, and the Sikh who was shot, and the Chinese delivery who was shot the week before, and another Chinese delivery who was also shot and died. And so people absolutely do not want to hear about that. And so maybe it's more about talking about go back home, like because I think that people there's this level people are very fragile and this is a tough time, a lot of things going on. And so I think,
sure.
can you talk about, so there were so many, can you remind us again, like how many shares of your posts, your original posts were there?
I think over 250. So just random people, probably 95% of them are people I have no idea. A lot of people, didn't even connect with me, but they reshared with really poignant messages. Some of them said, hey, like for the white people, like we can do better. A lot of the Asians said, I'm speaking up. I had other similar stuff. And people, and a lot of those actually went on to have hundreds of likes themselves too, or reactions of support. So it's kind of odd. Uh,
And amazing at the same time, because I mean, I share daily on all my channels
mhm,
and I meet silence. And, I'm sharing positive stories now and still it's
mhm,
silent. So just nobody
mm.
cares on my networks. I guess that says something about me, but I
Oh
don't
no,
know. I used to be
no.
popular, Andrew, but
Oh
um,
God.
can you talk about your reshare where you did the summary? You talked about the millions of people listening, but also some of those, because some of those comments I was a little concerning for me.
Mhm.
Can you
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about that a
yeah,
little bit?
absolutely. So when I got to like 1.4 million hits after like 3, 4 days, I knew I had to do a follow-on post to acknowledge the reactions. So I thanked everybody for their support, and I wanted to distill the main themes, the comments I received. So first of all, 90% of the comments, 95% were, just really supportive, wonderful, great, full of love. That's awesome. But some of the comments took a slightly different tack. A couple of folks said, hey, I'm a white person who lives in China or Japan or Korea, right? And I've experienced similar discrimination. And they didn't say like what I experienced in the US wasn't real. They just say, hey, it's all over the world and it happens. And I said, yeah, that is true. And I quoted Martin Luther King Jr. saying that, hey, my hope is all of the world, people are judged by not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character, right? So yeah, discrimination is bad. Asians discriminating against other people in our home countries too. Sure, absolutely bad. Um, some people suggested that I move back to like Asia. Like one person said, "Hey, move back to Asia, so you'll be a king." I probably got like 400, a couple hundred connection requests from Singapore. I don't know why, but I'm really big in Singapore and India. Like probably like I have no idea. I love Singapore. My family's originally from Malaysia, and people suggested move to Singapore. A lot of people in Canada in the GTA, Greater Toronto area, said you move to GTA. Even though people in Vancouver said no, Vancouver is almost as bad. I actually was born in Toronto, even though I'm a U.S. citizen now. And so I just kind of tactfully responded and said, hey, I've enjoyed my time in Singapore. I worked there for a while, Toronto, Taipei, because my wife is from Taipei. But I'm an American. I'm not quitting America, right? I love America. And actually, that part of that comment got a lot of likes from Americans too. And it was just, and I also just wanted to say again that, hey, what happened to me isn't that bad. I didn't lose my life. It's not like the Buffalo supermarket shootings or the war in Ukraine. But all I can do is really talk about my own lived experience. And that resonated. Um, and since then, it's like about 1.8 million people. And it's been humbling to watch that experience. There were a couple of trolls, but they actually got shut down by other people in the comments. A lot of the trolls deleted their own comments. And a lot of people wanted to put politics into it. So a lot of people explicitly linked the prior Trump presidential administration and the normalizing of rhetoric to hate. I didn't feel comfortable taking a political stand because honestly, I believe that anti-Asian stuff or like racial equality really should be universal across the political spectrum. I mean, I have friends who are Republicans in principle who aren't racist, right? And so I don't feel that LinkedIn was the medium to demonize the Republican Party. So while I did go through like all the hundreds of comments, I didn't like or support the overtly political ones, but I tried to thank other people for their support too. So in a way, like, hey, having a broad audience, trying to have a more nuanced idea and making it relatable, right? Just talking about a personal experience rather than just another statistic.
I Andrew, I've been working at this really just for 435 days. I mean, kind of a new
Yeah.
advocate for this, and you've really struck like the jackpot of how to relate to people. So thank you. How will you, now that you are you've had this experience and you see how important it is to a number of people and that you are well received. Um, will you do more than your annual Asian post, or how will you move forward on this topic?
Yeah, so just talking to you is a big step, right? And I'm happy to collaborate, or if you want to do a content piece together, I'm happy to do that. On Wednesday, I'm talking about authentic leadership for a panel sponsored by the American Bar Association. Later this week, I'm also convening a group of Asian American lawyers in the DC region just to talk about our experiences, trying to crack open um, the bamboo ceiling in the field of law. It's not easy. There were a couple of other DEI influencers who reached out to me, so I've scheduled time with them to talk later this week to talk about collaboration, et cetera. And I mean, I support DEI. Have I done anything formal or studied it? Not really. But if I can help the cause, I'm happy to help the cause.
Fantastic. I have found that DEI practitioners, they have a lot to, there's just a big scope of work, and Asians are just, they're not included.
I know.
I'm not giving them an excuse that you can ignore Asians because there's
Mhm.
neurodiversity, LGBTQ, and all that, but it's just like we're never included. And I was on this 3-hour panel with this LinkedIn group who are experts, and they seem pretty good. But however, they were acknowledging, for Pride for June, let's do this and this. Here's our speakers. And then I just messaged, oh, by the way, May is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. They're like, oh, thanks. And then just, the 12 speakers, none of them were Asian. And then just there was the stats they were using were Black and Hispanic and none Asian. And so, and I have no shade for this group. I think they're doing a pretty good job, but it's just
Mhm.
realize we're important too and
Oh, I
deserve.
totally get it. And I remember I was talking to an executive recruiter who is Korean American, and he had approached me about a position at a leading venture capital firm. We were just talking more broadly. And he said, look, I was at a DEI conference, a kind of DEI executive recruiting conference. And this Korean American guy said, hey, and I told the group that we are considered adjacent minorities, meaning that not true minorities who need a lot of government support and help, right? Because the model minority myth dominates, even though the statistics, Asian Americans are the least likely to be in management positions, et cetera. And he said, I got a lot of flack for that. But I believe it's true. And, in my own experience, I remember I am like an executive officer of my company and a couple companies before that. And in a prior experience, I had the chairman of the board tell me that, hey, our minority representation and the senior leadership is just really bad, right? And I said, well, you have me. He says, Andrew, you don't count. This is an old white guy, right? Like, and I was like, I don't count. And he says, no, you're one of us. I was like, geez, thanks.
Can you explain that? Because I think a lot of people don't understand, a lot of white people don't understand that that's not a compliment. Can you explain that?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So on the one hand, he feels like I'm reliable. I went to like an Ivy League school. He feels comfortable with me. Okay, great. He feels comfortable with me. And I mean, I grew up immigrant, but I'm socioeconomically, I'm doing very well. But on the other hand, like, dude, like, I'm not like you. Like, when I walk on the street, I have to watch out. If there's something suspicious, I might get yelled at. I cross the street. I try to avoid confrontation. So I'm not like him, right? And he's just so far removed from that. He just sees Andrew safe, right? He's not like the other minorities who might get aggressive or need special treatment or et cetera, right? So
Yeah.
you're kind of dividing us from the other people, other races out there who quote unquote need more help, are special. And I argue that I still think that honestly in the professional America, being Asian American looking at this, it's a disadvantage. But I say, okay, fuck it. I'm going to work harder, right? I'm going to work harder, not just professionally, but also to make connections, be extra personal to permanently dispel that. And I think I've enjoyed success in my professional life because of that, kind of overcompensating for the stereotype that a glasses wearing Asian isn't very social, right? And and that's not my person. I'm good, but it's kind of sad that I have to do that. Uh, but it is what it is, and you take the cards that you're dealt, you do the best you can. You speak up, and that is why I will continue to speak up.
Yay. I was remembering too, I was a year ago, one of my remaining friends, I've lost my entire network except for a handful of my friends just to silence. And this best friend is still a best friend, but she says, of course, the person who said that to you meant it in the best intent. He's giving you a compliment. You're just like me. You're white. You're just like me. And my best
Yeah,
friend who is white also was like, no, I don't see you as Asian. You're just like me. And it's just like, okay, I am Asian. I have a different perspective. I value Asian.
yeah,
Kind of like you're a good black. It's like, oh,
yeah,
so
yeah,
assuming that the others are bad. And it's like, no, you're
yeah,
just like me, not like the other Asians. And so
yeah.
there's so much learning where I think well-intentioned people just don't quite understand it. So I appreciate that you in your status position are able to
Mhm,
convey this information in a kind of really easily consumable Disney kind of thing. And I think
mm.
that we people of color, like angry Asian, angry black, and so it's hard. And I think you're really I'm very pleased with you out there.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, the good black comment you just made resonates because I had another executive tell me once, I actually just got gotten promoted and taken on additional responsibilities. And he said, Andrew, I know you'll do a good job because you're such a good boy. And I was like, good boy. Okay. I mean, that's kind of what you tell your dog, right? I mean, he
and
literally said, you're such a good boy. And I mean, good boy meaning you're obedient, you're conscientious. And I was like, okay. I mean, I just got in a promotion and and I took the promotion, but I never thought of that person the same way. I had some inklings, but I never thought about that person the same way. So
I,
yeah, there's plenty of stuff for me to post about in the future.
well, I think
But
I think I think that particular one is also a good one where people are like, "Oh, good boy, right? Good, right?" And boy, like maybe he's very familiar with you, but how old are you? And so yeah,
yeah,
gosh.
no, I mean it's all true. I mean, was it explicitly tied to my race? No, but I had the sense that
But you wouldn't say that to a white middle-aged dude
oh
who's
no,
a
no, no,
lawyer. You wouldn't say
no,
yeah, you would not say that to a white
yeah.
dude.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it goes with the whole like Asian passive myth, right? So again, I overcompensate. I'm very proactive, assertive. Um, sometimes I find I need to be a bit more aggressive sometimes, like never nasty, but very assertive, just so that people don't take me for granted.
Yeah.
Um, so it's kind of this mix. I think generally it's hardest with people who don't know you as well, like just people on the street. Usually when people get to know me, they're like, "Hey, he's a cool guy," like that. Then again, you still have people like older people, like executives who are kind of set in their ways and their worldview, and you just can't get through to them. Or you work with them for a while and they still have these implicit assumptions that slip out, like you're just like us or Andrew's a good boy. So again, F that. Anyway,
Yeah, well, I think this is important video for people to see. Just the idea of Asians talking, we can just talk without code switching and we understand and we can laugh at things that are super not funny. I
oh
think,
yeah,
because it's survival. So,
oh yeah, 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 yeah. And granted, again, most of the people are great, right? And really supportive. Like the 95% plus the comments I got, 1.8 million views, really great. really affirmed my faith in humanity as a whole. Hopefully, it's just kind of particularly bad actors. That being said, yeah, no, we should keep speaking up.
Yeah. Well, I am very inspired. I mean, last night I just inspired by you. And then last night I watched the PBS special of Duke Kana Kahanamoku. Have you heard of him?
No, sorry.
So he brought surfing uh, to everyone. Like
Cool.
he brought it. He was born in 1890, and he was an Olympic. He won, I think, 7 medals, and
Wow.
then, but he experienced a lot of racism. But the idea that, like, everybody in Hawaii knows who he is. My dad knows who he is. My cousin. So he's a big deal, and he was the best swimmer in the world. Yet nobody knows about him. And
No.
just in 2016, so the surfing became Olympic sport, and he was working on that since he was born. Like, he was in the Olympics in 1915 or something.
Mhm,
And so the idea of being persistent and being patient, and because I'm used to like instant gratification. Hey, let's
mhm,
do this, done, boom. But with
mhm,
racism, it doesn't work that way. And so it's kind of
mhm,
a rude awakening for me.
mhm.
So I'm just so pleased to get your inspiration and the Duke Kana Kahana Moku. I'm going to send you a link to that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'd love to hear more stories of forgotten heroes. And you just have to work harder and speak up more, right? And I just try to live my life. I never thought I would be a role model or somebody to look up to, but if I can be helpful, I'm happy to be helpful.
Done. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.